Hello everyone, welcome to Methods 2 Week 2. By now everyone should have completed their 3 patterns. In preparation for assignment 1 part 2, we will be selecting one of those patterns that you want to further develop and possibly even make it more complex. So as you can see on my Rhino screen, we have one of those patterns. First thing I am going to do is select the pattern by dragging my mouse to form a selection window. As you can see, all of the pattern has been selected. I have locked the red bounding square in its own layer, as I do not want to select that for this command. So once I select the pattern, I am going to group them together by typing group and pressing enter. What that does is links everything that I had previously selected into one entity, as you can see here. Another way that we can do group is Control G, which is a shortcut. Again, that same thing as regular grouping. Another thing you can do is come over here to the group objects icon, the 3 circles, and you can group objects in that manner. If you ever want to ungroup these objects, you can simply type ungroup, and they will act as their individual elements. For this purpose, I'm going to have them all grouped together. So in order to start making this pattern a little bit more complex, or to fulfill the 600 line minimum requirement, we can do one of several things. We can either copy this grid this pattern multiple times. We can start rotating it on top of itself to create interesting layers, or we can start mirroring it to have it be shown in different orientations. So for that first one, let's mirror it. So all that means is it will mirror. If you type mirror and press enter, you are prompted up here at the command line to start the mirror plane, and what that means, it will mirror it along the plane, along the axis that you decide. Right now, since I don't have my ortho snap on, I can mirror it in any direction. If I wanted to turn my ortho snap on, I can either come down here and press ortho snap at the bottom of the screen, or I can hold down shift and will automatically temporarily apply ortho snap. For this instance, let's just mirror it along the y-axis, and then select both of those and mirror it again along the x-axis. Now if we look at this, we can kind of already start to see a new pattern develop. But let's see what it looks like with the line weights. So what I'm going to do is go to our viewport, right click it, and go to print preview. And this is what the pattern will look like with the applied line weights and line types. As you can see, this is the original square that we started out with. And we have already quadrupled the amount of lines and the complexity of the pattern. Okay, I'm gonna go back to the original pattern, just undoing everything by Control Z. Now let's look at rotating this pattern. We can do it one of two ways. If we have the gumball turned on, which we can see here, we can select this blue radius and it will prompt us with what degree do we want to rotate this. I'm going to just go ahead and say 45, and it rotates it at the center point of that group. But let's say we want to actually be more intentional for rotation and also copy it. What we can type is rotate, and it's going to prompt here again the center of rotation. Maybe I want the rotation to be in this bottom left corner. So I will click. Now it has prompted me the angle, our first reference point, but also pay attention to the copy equals no. If I select that and click yes, it will maintain the original instance and copy a new version of it at the new rotation. So what I'm going to type now is the angle that I want this to be copied. Let's just do another 45. And we can either press enter and we can have two versions, or we can keep rotating and copying by pressing or we can continue rotating, copying by adding more numbers. So maybe I want to also rotate it at 30 degrees, and then again at 15 degrees. Once I'm done rotating and copying, I can press enter. And now we have 4 versions that are all rotated from this bottom left corner at an intervals of 15 degrees. And again, we can kind of start to see a whole new pattern start to emerge. Maybe I really only want to work with this pattern and this orientation and develop it even further by either rotating it or mirroring it. What I can do is select it and type isolate. That will isolate that pattern. The reason that the bounding square was not hidden is because right now that layer is locked, so it is incapable of being altered. So now let's move this 3 inches to the right. I think that's okay for now. And what I want to do is recover all those other patterns that were previously isolated. What I can do for that is type unisolate, and we'll unhide all those previously hidden patterns. Okay, let's go back to the original pattern. And let's talk about another way that we can add multiple instances of this pattern rather than rotating and mirroring. One command, array, will allow us to do that very quickly. So we type array, and if we don't press enter yet, but we look at the drop-down list, so we have multiple versions of array, whether it be array, array whole, linear, polar, surface. For these couple new instances, we're going to do array, array linear, array polar. So first let's see what array does. if I select array and have my pattern selected, it's asking me how many do I want to copy in the X direction. So for instance, let's just say 3. And how many do I want to copy in the Y direction? And I'll also say 3. In the Z direction, since we're only working in the X and Y axes, the Z will stay at 1. And then I can either select the base point and where I want the new instances to be placed. For instance, if I click here, it will give me a preview of what all these patterns will look like. Or if I undo and just array again, the 3, 3, 1, I can type out the X spacing at the command line. For instance, let's say I want them to be spaced out 9 inches apart from each other. And then I also want the Y to be spaced out 9 inches apart from each other. It will create a pattern that each pattern is spaced 9 inches away from each other by 3 long in the x-axis, 3 tall in the y-axis. We can really start to see how this pattern not only drastically increases in the line count, but also in the complexity of the pattern itself. For the other arrays, let's switch to our second pattern, which is a more simple, centralized geometric pattern. What I'm going to do is, again, group the pattern together. And then we're going to test the other arrays. So array linear, where the typical array worked in the x and y axes, so 2 axes. This one works in only 1 axis, or 1 direction. So what it's prompting us is how many items do we want to have? I'm going to say 3. And it's asking us where do we want our first reference point? Where are we starting the array or the copy from? So I'm going to select the bottom left corner. And where's the second reference point? Or how far away should all these elements be copied? Rather than copying them 9 inches apart like the last one, and in a straight line, let's actually do a whole new direction and only at this point. So now we can see how these elements start overlapping with each other. Similar to that, I go back and type array polar. This is a version of array that is akin to rotate. Its copies or arrays things along a central point. So for instance, if I say I want my center of the polar array to be at the middle of this pattern, and 6 items, 6 different individual patterns, that's fine. And then the angle that I want them to be rotated along, or to fill, let's first see what it shows if I do 360. I do 360, it rotates all 6 of those patterns 360 degrees. But I can kind of see, since we have 6 items, they start overlapping with each other. So if I type a different pattern, for instance, at 180, well, it's 180 items, let's go up to 6. Select the fill angle at the top. 180. Now we see that there are no duplicate patterns on top of each other. I select enter. We cleverly almost create a circle. And that's really nice, almost like a Mandela effect. Maybe I think that's very interesting and I want to develop this further, but create new geometries. So one way that we can quickly create new lines, first I'm going to hide everything except this very dark layer because that's the layer that I want to be affecting right now. So I'm going to turn off all my lines besides the heavy layer. And maybe for this scenario, I want all of these lines to be joined together and to make one continuous outline. So what I will do is type curve boolean, select all the curves that I want to affect, press enter, and it's asking me to click inside the regions to keep. So we can do that one of two ways. Either we select each region individually, as I'm doing here, and we can see that they're being selected because they are now being highlighted with this black outline and white semi-transparent or opaque hatch. Or if I deselect those, I can select on the outside, on the inside here, as well as here, and it quickly selects all of these elements at once. And I don't really care to have these lines show up again. So what I'm going to do is delete input and all. So what that will do, if I select enter, it deletes all of those lines that were previously selected. Now I have this continuous outline of all those individual elements that were there before. So let's go ahead and turn everything back on. Let's move this back to our heavy layer. And maybe we want to take this a step further and start offsetting this new shape that we created outwards. So what I'm going to do is type offset, similar to what we did the first week. And I can start offsetting this line outwards. Let me try that again. I'm going to select the line, type offset, the distance I want it to be offset from, let's say 3 inches. We can see a preview. And it will create that new line. So a little hard to see, but this is it right now. I changed the layer. Let's undo that offset. I'm gonna turn off some of these other layers quickly. Delete that. Maybe instead of offsetting it, we just want to scale it. And go down here, turn on my center O snap, find the center, and I want this now to be along this edge. instead of being circling, it's inscribed on the center. However, we may also want to scale it only in one direction. So we can scale 1D. And if I select a point at the bottom, and then select the point at the top, now instead of scaling it in all directions, it's only scaling it along this y-axis that I've selected. So let's just show it there. Maybe I want to array this polarly, and I'll select the center of our pattern, and 6 items seems fine. Press enter. Now it's only arraying them half of the circle. So to fix that, as it says 180, we can change that fill angle to read as 360. And now we create this new pattern. Right. That's a couple ways that we can work with our existing patterns and our existing geometries and create new elements. Curve Boolean was a way that we can combine multiple 2D elements that intersect each other and create whole new elements. I'm going to go over that command really quickly once again, just with this simple geometry I just drew. So if I curve Boolean, I'm going to select all of these things. And let's say I only want to keep this interior element. I'll select it, press enter, because I'm still deleting all the input. And it will leave me with that one object, that one outline. Keep in mind that it only works if things are completely enclosed. Right? So if I have these elements here, I'm going to turn off ortho. While it may look from back here completely closed, if I try to curve Boolean, I just want this triangle, you can see it's not being highlighted. It's because it's not completely closed. If, however, we do close that, curve Boolean, select those curves, and select that triangle, it is now able to be selected. However, let's not delete everything, but just delete the lines that were used. I want to press enter. So we still have all those original lines, but as you can see, it has split this previous whole rectangle as well as all of these lines, but it has made this triangle one closed curve. This concept of Boolean is very handy in terms of 2D, but we'll also be using it a lot more in the next assignment when we start messing with solid forms, 3-dimensional objects.